My name is Amy Baylor, and I'm a program officer at the National Science Foundation, and I want to welcome all of you to the Next Generation STEM High School Forum. Yay! Special welcome to the presidential awardees. How was your ceremony last night? Was it good? All right, awesome. Very nice, very nice. We also have some distinguished guests and some invited participants. And we're going to have a great day. Later in the afternoon, we're going to have the chance to really frame some of the challenges and future of some of the research in this area. So we've got a great group of principal investigators and other researchers that are going to participate in that. So, that said, it is my pleasure to introduce Mr. Tom Khalil. Mr. Khalil is the Deputy Director for Policy of the Office of Science and Technology Policy and Senior Advisor for Science, Technology, and Innovation for the National Economic Council in the White House. Let me put his picture up here. Mr. Khalil has been instrumental to many of the Obama administration's efforts to advance science for the public good. One example is the BRAIN Initiative, which seeks to do for neuroscience what the Human Genome Project did for genomics. It aims to help researchers uncover the mysteries of brain disorders such as Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease, depression, and traumatic brain injury. It's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Khalil.
Good morning. Is everyone fired up and ready to go? Yes. Is everyone fully caffeinated? Yes. All right. I want to join in congratulating all the presidential awardees. I hope you have been having a great week. And I just wanted to say a little bit about one of the president's initiatives that is related to Next Gen High Schools. As I hope you know, President Obama has really focused on STEM education very early on in the administration. He said, you know, if you win the NCAA or the Super Bowl, you get to come to the White House. The same thing should be true if you are a winner of one of the science fairs or the robotics competitions. And he's had the opportunity to meet some really amazing students. I remember one of the first science fairs he held, he met a young woman, 16, who had already been using functionalized gold nanoparticles as a way of developing smart anti-cancer therapeutics that would deliver drugs to tumors while leaving healthy cells untouched. And it really made the rest of us feel like slackers. Because, you know, I don't know about you, but when I was 16, I think I was mostly playing Dungeons and Dragons. I was not working on a cure for cancer. We're actually going to be having a big event on Next Generation High Schools next week, so stay tuned for a series of announcements that not only the federal departments and agencies will be making, but philanthropists and school districts and states who are really excited about the potential of Next Gen High Schools. I want to talk about one thing that has also been a priority for the president, which I think ties in very nicely with the discussion that you're going to be having about Next Gen High Schools, and that is the maker movement. How many people have been to a maker fair? So there are a number of exciting trends that are going on. So first of all, a growing number of individuals are becoming interested in not just being consumers of things, but being producers of things. And so we can see that in the really rapid growth in participation in maker fairs. There's one in Northern California, for example, that now attracts over 100,000 people. So that's one thing. It's just a cultural interest in the maker movement. The second thing is that the tools, in the same way that we went from the mainframe to the mini computer to the PC to the supercomputer that now fits in your pocket, and that we really democratized information and communications technologies. The same thing is happening with respect to our ability to design and make just about anything. So the tools, the hardware and software tools, are becoming more affordable, easier to use, and now people are developing all these mechanisms for providing shared access to these tools. The third thing is that a growing number of organizations, both inside and outside the government, are waking up to the fact that they can both benefit from and contribute to the maker movement. So we've been working with a group of universities that have been embracing the maker movement. So MIT has decided that if you're going to apply to MIT, not only can you send them your SAT and your GPA score, but you can send them your maker portfolio. Case Western Reserve University is investing in a 50,000 square foot facility that will have coffee on the ground floor, design, prototyping, and fabrication spaces on the middle floors, and an incubator, a business incubator for new business ideas on the top floor. And we're seeing that not just with universities, but with companies like Intel and GE that are embracing the maker movement, libraries that are creating maker spaces, science museums are embracing this as well. And recently, an organization called Maker Ed and Digital Promise announced that 1,500 schools had taken a pledge to get going with respect to incorporating the making into classrooms. So they're committing to find a space. They are committing to identify someone who will be a champion for that, whether it's a teacher or maybe someone from outside the school, and they're committing to create some opportunity for the students to show their work to the community. Recently, the Education Secretary, John King, did an op-ed in which he talked about what were some of the potential educational benefits of this. So one is the opportunity to increase student engagement. So one thing that we know from survey data is that students, the extent to which they are bored increases as students go from primary to middle to high school. And you don't have to have a PhD in cognitive science to recognize that students will probably be learning less if they have checked out. So I think that's one thing, is the maker movement an opportunity to increase student engagement? The second is in terms of getting them interested in STEM. If you talk to lots of scientists and engineers about how it is that they first got interested in STEM-related subjects, a lot of them will say, well, I had a chemistry set, and I used to be able to blow things up. Part of the problem is that we have now taken all of the interesting chemicals out of chemistry sets. So we need to find new entry points, things that will spark that imagination and that interest, and I think the maker movement could be one of those things. It could enable us to move from just-in-case learning to just-in-time learning. So a lot of times when students will say, why do I need to know this? They may get a very unsatisfactory answer, like, because it's going to be on the test. And there are some students who are really conscientious rule followers, and that will be a sufficient answer for them. But there's a much, I think, broader population of students that may not find that to be a terribly compelling answer. And so if they say, hey, there's some problem that I care about, and now I understand why I need to learn this geometry, because I'm trying to design and make something that is personally meaningful to me, or that responds to help solve some real world problem. The Secretary also noted that the maker movement could be a way of revitalizing career and technical education. So in a lot of schools, we have not invested sufficiently in career and technical education. Those are some of the reasons why I think it's really worth exploring the educational potential of the maker movement. And under Joan's leadership, NSF has really been making some important investments in exploring the educational potential of making an education. I think a big opportunity that we have is that there are lots of individuals and organizations that I think would be willing to help schools embrace this. So, one of the ways in which I talk about this is, if you think about the way libraries happened, an important way in which they happened is that Andrew Carnegie wrote a check for what in today's dollars would be $1.6 billion. So that's certainly one scenario. Some individual who is a philanthropist gets really excited about this and decides to make a major investment in this. But I think a more interesting metaphor would be the barn raising. So if you think about how barn raisings happen, sorry about that. So if you think about the way that barn raisings happen, those were fundamentally community activities where everyone chipped in. So in Pittsburgh, for example, the Pittsburgh Children's Museum has been working with schools in the Pittsburgh region to help launch successful Kickstarter campaigns to help provide some of the initial support for this. So I think that if schools were willing to say, yes, we want to explore this, we want to, we're going to allocate a space, we're going to identify a teacher that is excited about this, I think there's a real potential to help mobilize some funding, some in-kind contributions, and some mentors who can help the students work on progressively more challenging projects, so that this could be, we could see thousands or even tens of thousands of high-tech barn raisings occurring all over the country. And for a tiny, tiny fraction of what high schools spend on new football stadiums. So anyway, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And I'm really looking forward to learning about what advice you have for us as we pursue this next generation high school agenda. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom. One of the things that he mentioned was the maker movement. And for those of you that are going to be around, we will have a parallel session at 11 a.m. with a panel to talk about some of the new directions in the maker movement. Just wanted to mention that. Next up, it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Joan Ferrini Monday. She is the Assistant Director of the National Science Foundation, a position that she has held since February 2011. And she is responsible for the leadership of the Directorate for Education and Human Resources. She had served the foundation in a number of capacities since 2007 as inaugural director of the Division on Research and Learning in informal and formal settings. So she has been a great leader. I just recently returned to NSF, and I'm really happy to be under her leadership. So let me turn it over to Joan. Thanks,
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Hope you're all doing well. Again, a special welcome and congratulations to our Presidential Award-winning teachers. And because we've added a larger set of folks to this audience, I'd like to do a round of applause for our teachers, from the folks who've not yet met all the teachers. We've had, I think, a couple of very wonderful days of interaction with our PEMST winners, and we're delighted about that. Has anybody told you that sometimes we call these winners the PEMSTers? No, maybe we shouldn't have said that, but anyway. So it's very exciting for me to be able to be here and to talk with you a little bit about the idea of next generation STEM and next generation high schools. You met Dr. Cordova briefly yesterday at the awards event for the teachers who were there. Dr. Cordova is the director of the National Science Foundation. And one thing that Dr. Cordova has been working on with us, with the leadership of NSF, is to think about the future of science. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that as a bit of backdrop for the reason why we want to talk about next generation schools. Because of course at the National Science Foundation our focus is on advancing the progress of science. And when we think about the future of science, it has many features that are really relevant for all of us who think about education. So if you haven't seen this yet, we can give you websites and places to find it. The NSF has announced what we're calling the 10 big ideas that will shape some of our future direction and that are meant to be exciting new visionary directions for science, where we already know that the scientific community has done enormous groundwork and where we believe the community is ready for a next step toward advancing these ideas. And there are 10. I'm going to just mention 4 of them quite briefly because I think they give a flavor for what we need to be thinking about now in education. So shifting over to the 4 ideas that I'd like to mention, one of them is about harnessing data. So all of science, virtually every field of science today is data rich, and therefore as we think about the future, we think about increased availability of sensors, of instrumenting all kinds of environments, of understanding and having measurements available for all kinds of phenomena, well beyond those that we have traditionally measured well, but new things that are hard to measure that can be more easily measured with technology. When you think about that globally for science, what that means is that we will have a kind of science that requires deep understanding of data analytics, of statistics, of the use of the compression of data, the sorting through and pattern finding in data. And you think about science in that way, and then try to imagine mapping back from the scientists who will do that work and think about what the K through 12 world might need to look like going forward to excite people about this area, to help them be ready. A second big idea that NSF is promoting is called the rules of life. It's about how we look at how environmental and contextual factors influence the genomic factors of biological phenomena. And so as we think about that, again, it's computationally intensive, will involve a lot of modeling, a lot of instrumenting, and this kind of interdisciplinarity that also is characteristic of the science of the future. Both of these ideas, harnessing data, the rules of life, these are ideas that involve several parts of the National Science Foundation. And so this notion of collaboration, of convergent science, where fields come together to tackle big new problems, is really central as we think about the future of science. How central is it as we think about K through 12 education? The notion of working across disciplines, working in teams, working in interdisciplinary ways. Being able to explain and be expert in pieces of knowledge so that those can be assembled together and then the science can advance. A third area that I wanted to mention is the human technology frontier. That is an area where we're focused on the ways in which technology for doing science, for the world of work, for the world of education, for the service industries. How can technology best serve our nation's productivity as well as well-being? And so when you think about that, social scientists will be heavily involved in imagining how, in studying how the human technology interface can be most fruitful and most satisfactory. And that's a collaboration that involves computer scientists, engineers, education people, social scientists, and beyond. And then the fourth that I wanted to mention is navigating the new Arctic. Really exciting conversations about what kind of instrumentation might be necessary across the Arctic region to help us understand everything from evolving issues of climate science to the ways in which humans interact with information and examine issues of risk-taking and decision-making. So my point is that this is a wide-ranging area, set of areas of science. I've only mentioned 4, there are several others. And now I'd like you to kind of keep that in the back of your mind as you think about schooling and K through 12 education. We could have similar conversations, and we do, with our colleagues at the undergraduate level and in graduate school. But to have people who will choose these areas of science, who will become excited and interested in engaging and working right at the cutting edge of science, that's a long ramp up. That doesn't start by entering graduate school and deciding that you'd like to be involved in this. It starts with inspiration from K through 12 experiences and teachers and activities. And so what we'd like to focus on today in these conversations is the future of particularly high school settings for STEM learning, but we understand that that will fully involve K through 8 work along the way. As we move toward being a majority-minority nation, as technology is ubiquitous, and as we increase our knowledge through cognitive science of issues of teaching and learning, we have great opportunities to envision this future for education and to begin to design it. So this forum will raise a whole host of issues. Tom has talked a lot about the maker movement, where I think we have a great example of very new opportunities for learning that blur the boundaries between in-school and out-of-school learning. How do we begin to take advantage of these blurry boundaries? How do teachers make the best use of what students bring from outside of school, particularly as we move toward wanting to value the asset of diversity in our classrooms? And so the maker movement is one very intriguing phenomenon that I think has great potential for helping to shape the direction of K-12 education. Similarly, advanced cyber infrastructure, data-intensive availability, essentially, of information, too, can change what happens. We're already seeing wonderful proposals coming into NSF, and some of you, particularly our K-12 colleagues, may be working with these tools for assessment, for real-time work in classrooms to help you understand exactly where students are with technologies and so on. How will this lead toward personalized learning and toward customized lessons for the particular students in the classroom that you're working with? What will schools need to look like in order to support this? How do we manage this well so that the important social interaction pieces of education remain central? All of these questions are the sorts of things we're starting to talk about, and we appreciate your help with this through the day today. We also see, in addition to the focus on making that's happening in part outside of formal schooling, we see the emphasis on engineering and design making its way into curricular emphases in schools, and I know that we have many of our award-winning teachers who work in those areas, particularly at K-6. And we have Computer Science for All, the President's initiative announced earlier this year, where we are imagining what it would look like for everyone to have access to the learning of computer science, computational thinking, computing, and how will that be appropriate at what grades? How does that intersect with more traditional school subjects? The whole concept of introducing a new subject into school is just fascinating from a policy perspective. How does that happen? What does that mean for teachers? And so how do we look at this going forward? And then finally, the emphasis on inclusion, on talent development, on making opportunities to learn accessible to all children. All of that is a part of the conversation of the next generation of K-12 schooling, and so we're delighted that you're able to be here and talk with us about these issues. As Tom indicated, there will be more on this coming up next week, and it's an important theme, I think, certainly for us at the National Science Foundation, where we always are looking toward the future. We're always looking at what we need to invest in today that will support the progress of science tomorrow. So with that, I wish you well for the day. We'll be eager to hear how it all goes and to understand more about what's possible based on your insights and wisdom. So thank you very much.